China and Russia have been developing this extreme cold weather technologies, not only for their sea routes where they're going to be running ships outside control of the US Navy. Why would they go to all this effort just to send goods back and forth across the Arctic? They're spending hundreds of billions in technology, innovation, and investment, if not trillions, just to run hundreds of billions of assets across the ocean up there. The ROI makes 0 cents, 0 cents, unless it's going to be a global thing. Then it would make sense.
Robotics don't do well in the cold. The rubbers get stiff, the lubricants get hard, the batteries drain. The problem would be that both the crops and the robots wouldn't work in a cold world, right? But they might work underground. The only problem is how would you power a city of robots and people?
Here's the whole thing about climate debate that I really didn't like. So the GISP, which is the Greenland Ice Survey Project, the GISP to ice core data set, before all this global warming hype really got kicked in and it became political, the GISP2 was the gold, stamp. That was the gold standard for all temperature measurements, historically going back for the last 10,000 years. But what it showed was 10,000 years prior and 8,000 years and 6,000 and 4,000 years prior, it was warmer than today. And then subsequently, we're coming off on a curve coming down, and we are literally at the cusp of the edge of entering into the next ice age. That was very inconvenient to try to push a full narrative of we're coming into a broiling planet. When if you look subsequently, it's 2 degrees cooler than it was 8,000 years ago. So stepping off into something that could occur in a quicker fashion, like where we sit, on the latitudes banded of our industries, habitation zones, otherwise known as cities, villages, towns, infrastructure, whether it be pipelines or railways or ports, that whole gamut is going to shrink. If it comes down to it, what you're talking about, there's a rapid onset because of some sort of ice melt event, or we're truly stepping off into another constrictive, I should say, environment of where humans can live and operate, then that changes everything, including the full valuation of the stock market. You can't value companies if they can't operate in the same areas anymore, which kind of winds back into there's something, Andy Schechtman and myself had talked about this, the Arctic century. So China and Russia have been developing this extreme cold weather technologies, not only for their sea routes where they're going to be running ships outside control of the US Navy, but the technology involved for even something as simple as a tire to run in the middle of winter in the high Arctic requires engineering feats that are so far secret, as we shall say. But China and Russia are the forefront and light years ahead of where we sit in terms of technologies for running in the Arctic, and not just moving from point A to point B to like do a research project. They're talking about setting up entire cities up there for this trans-Arctic route for all the commodities between the nations to run. They're setting up ports as we would, string of pearls coming across through India up into the Middle East and back into China. There's the same thing that's occurring in the Arctic. They're setting up this route of ports around the entire Arctic Circle with nuclear icebreakers that run 24/7, 365. Middle of winter in the Arctic, they have developed technologies that will allow them to bypass everything that we understand as a bottleneck and constraint right now. This is not a toothpaste. It's a revolution for your teeth. Remineralize, strengthen teeth, all natural ingredients, essential oils, minerals, salts, Alpha Vedic Dental Solutions System. That's alphavedic.com/civilization. We're always trying to bring you the best products here that we think will enhance your life, especially if supply chains break down further, or if there's some disruption in our lives here. It seems in the news, more and more possible, but hey, who knows? Maybe it's a mind game. But what is not is keeping your dental health up. And not a lot of people are talking about this. We always see the storable foods. But what about dental care during these same emergency situations? Will your toothpaste eventually run out? Well, if it does, then what? So, like I say, this whole micro gut biome is driven by your oral cavity first. So, take a look at what they have, alphavedic.com/civilization. Every purchase you make helps keep our live radio show and podcast on air, bringing you more information just like this. Alphavedic.com/civilization. That link is in the show notes below. And as always, I appreciate your valuable time and joining us in this ever and most important conversation as we move forward in our world. The nuclear icebreaker fleet, the full winterized Arctic battle, APC carriers, everything in between for habitation, pipelines, everything has been just developed to operate in the Arctic. So I was wondering also, is that really the full story we're being given? Or is this the technology that we need as we enter a colder planet for all countries to survive? Because you cannot tell me that our economies have all shifted right now because of the passage of this bill, that we're now moving into a stablecoin standard, full on crypto world that's going to overtake, supplant, and run parallel to the US dollar as a crutch to it versus total collapse. For what reason? They just need to kick the can down the road a little bit longer. But this movement between cryptocurrency world and US dollar based world, we're getting into this etheric kind of blending of the two where they're going to crutch together for a minute until they don't. And all this going along when they're setting up all the Arctic routes and Arctic technology for a colder planet. And I'm just thinking, a lot of these excuses they're giving us don't seem to hold water any longer. I think they're covering under the excuse of an enemy or a different, there's so many excuses given out there, but why would they go to all this effort just to send goods back and forth across the Arctic? They're spending hundreds of billions in technology, innovation, and investment, if not trillions, just to run hundreds of billions of assets across the ocean up there. The ROI makes 0 cents, unless it's going to be a global thing. Then it would make sense.
I was thinking about this for a while. If it were to happen that things got considerably colder, which made things harder to live, then we go back to that idea of AI and robotics. Where does that kind of fit in? And I was going to show you this, like kind of this is my train of thinking here.
Yeah, but Arctic-hardened everything on the robotic side too.
Right. Well, the idea would be all of these robots, but we all know that they kind of are crappy in the cold, and that's kind of their weak point. Robotics don't do well in the cold. The rubbers get stiff, the lubricants get hard, the batteries drain. But if you were to put yourself in an underground city that could occupy, I don't know, tens of thousands of people in it, and you needed to
Oh
feed
no,
those
millions.
people or
Yeah.
millions, whatever. These are just ones of the ancient world. We know that they've built modern continuity of government, things like this. So if they knew that was going to happen, I would think that what they would do is invest in a future that most people don't think is going to happen. So that might include a bunch of worker robots, humanoid and otherwise. You might need, I don't know, a bunch of different farm bots, like we were talking about before, the rise of the farming bots. All kinds of them. This is a great article. Each link leads to another robot that's just fascinating and very efficient and runs great. The problem would be that both the crops and the robots wouldn't work in a cold world, right? But they might work underground. The only problem is how would you power a city of robots and people? I don't know. It's like, have they come up with these ideas already? Have they already
Nuclear.
put them into fruition or made the devices? So I don't know. You might need an artificial sun to not only power things but also grow your crops underground. And it's not like, and the reason I put this up here is because the latest thinking is that some of these people were in here for decades living down in these things. These are modern underground cities that are public. This has nothing to do with continuity of government. Some of them, they list the ancient ones, but some of them are modern that they've built now, like this one right here, Central Government War Headquarters, aka Burlington. And then you have places like Cheyenne Mountain. You got rumors of Dulce. I've seen maps that show the entire state of New Mexico with underground railways, high-speed railways, which is funny because a lot of people are asking why the United States, being kind of the origin of the train system, and all of that, why is it that we're having a problem making these high speed rails to interconnect the United States? It's almost as if they know that that would be useless in the near future because people won't be traveling or whatever. My mind can wonder on all kinds of reasons why they do or don't do things, but you have in Europe and Asia some pretty nice high speed trains. We may actually have those same trains. They're just underground. And it's not as far fetched as you think. Most of the stockpile of goods and products are actually held in limestone caverns that are man-made throughout central United States. There's you can watch, I don't know how many shows now that kind of basically show the outside of it, the commercial side of it. But even the commercial side of it is a massive cities. And that's just the ones that they've showed us where trucks can enter the holes, and go to their designated corporation that they pick up their whatever, or they drop it off. So these things actually exist already. And you wouldn't think that, back to the concentration camp thing, when you start putting all these puzzles in a fictional future, you tend to realize that future isn't so fictional. So if something happens, the infrastructure for that event has already been created. So we have underground cities, we have underground transportation, we have robots, we have artificial means of providing light and power to all of the devices. So the idea that there may have been or there could be a breakaway civilization is kind of asinine at this point when we know that there are breakaway civilizations. There's black budget projects, and we're all talking about the debt. Why don't you try to track down where those billions of dollars actually go, and you'll find out that it's untrackable. Most of it's untrackable. It's going into black projects. And then we're talking about the big, beautiful bill. That's just stuff you're allowed to know about. That's only things that you're allowed to argue about, read about, and that that's the public stuff. They don't show you where all the missing money goes. Where does all that interest gained and disappeared go to the federal banks and things like that just disappear? It disappears. And we've talked about it with the crypto. We talked about it with the gold. And remember when Trump was going to go over there and it was a big deal and we were joking about it that it would never happen? Well, it never happened. He never went to Fort Knox and inspected the gold. Matter of fact, they just dropped that story out of the headlines because that's a no-no. But what we did see in the headlines is a lot of country, international transfers of gold where they moved it to new locations. So it's all in new places with new owners, and they're still trying to get the bottom of the bucket. And I've showed you many of those articles about pawn shops, jewelries, those companies that you send it in and then they recycle it. So they are gathering all of the resources. So if you were a detective and you were looking at it from a point of view of like a think tank, how they think, they said there's going to be AI Air Force by 2025. We see exactly that. The nations of the world, robot wars happening right on cue. The next phase, the only phase that I see coming, no matter what the trigger is, whether it's I don't know. You can just pick. Like I said, there's so many of them to reach in the hat and pull out. You have natural disasters, man-made disasters, war, different reasons for famine kind of, works in there. And then you also have this idea of bioterrorism or just natural pandemics, natural ones that go out. So any number of these triggers, and you realize that they could totally reset right now and it's all set up. They have the technology. It's here. It's not something that we're conspiracy theorying about or theorizing about. It is here. They do have the technology. It's ahead of what you think it is, because just with what I can find on open public, articles and whatnot, I can see that if you intertangle them or merge them all, they have what it takes to reset the entire global civilization at this point.
Shall we talk about global reset civilization? Now, this is a city in Czech Republic, which I visited, called Neumo, but I didn't know there was an underground city there that can hold up to 40,000 people. And not only this, the part you're seeing right here, if I may, let me see. This town is connected across a valley, which you can see here. And if you follow my mouse, it goes all the way down, all the way back up over to the other side. And on the other side is the connector to the underground city. So they built it to go beneath this castle, all the way under this river, and all the way up on the other side. So both sides of this valley are connected together through the same city. And the entire hillside here was sculpted out from beneath. And apparently what they keep telling you, the story is that there are marauders coming through, and you can see some of these same things. Sort of looks like any of the gourmets or any of the, they've rebuilt quite a bit of it so you can go in as a tourist attraction. They could take you through, kind of, but it was vast. And there's springs under there, and there's rebuilt sections, more like concrete. They really wanted to get the catacomb looked for you and all it. But this is what the city looks like. And then everywhere you walk around, it has the same kind of real old, like 1500s vibe to it. The cathedral there still has the domes and the electric collection devices. There it is. Right here, all the electric collection devices from Tesla Technologies right here on top of that. And here as well with the domes in the cathedral. And another whole underground city nobody's ever heard of. When people are talking about Gourmet and Cappadocia and Darren Yanku and all these different underground cities, yeah, famous ones, but I did not know there are another dozen underground cities all across the Czech Republic. They're also in Poland, underground cities. Huge amount of underground cities everywhere on this planet. So if our infrastructure, now think about this as a government and cost savings, you're trying to do analysis. All right, we're coming into termination ice age entry event / extreme cooling that will just knock the legs out of global food production. Would you even care about the stuff on the top of the planet if you had all this subsurface technology ready to go for the new world? Why are they not repairing our bridges? Why are our roads never repaired? Ports, locks, especially the locks from like the upper, when you're coming to upper Great Lakes, coming down through St. Lawrence Seaway. And then once you come into the Mississippi, like that whole chain of locks is, even the Department of Transportation is talking about how damaged it is and how close to catastrophic failure it is. Yet we put no money into repairing that. Why not? It's super important for grain deliveries and movements across the Mississippi, like down to loading ports down in Louisiana. Why aren't they repairing that? What is this thing where there's no repairs going on to our major, most important, vital infrastructure? Well, I would do the same thing. If I knew there was going to be some sort of flood, like think about a place where you knew there was going to be a volcanic eruption or some sort of landslides that were coming down, and they were measuring it. Okay, you got about 2 months left. The cracks are showing this. We've seen many a place in the world where that happens. Okay, definitely the land subsidence here. You got about a month left, and the way it's going is going to calve off. Would you remodel your house at that point? Of course you wouldn't. You just be like, we're bailing. Get whatever you can out, extract the value. I'm taking my light fixtures. I'm taking the light sockets. I can get the copper value out of that. I'm taking everything. And I would leave just the facade of it, or just the structure itself. And this is what we're seeing in today's world. So how close are we really? I guess I'll leave that's the question. Like, how close is this event that we need a new entire currency to run across the reserve currency?
Yeah, I was thinking, what kind of currency would you be using in one of these underground cities? Because, I'm showing this and I'm pointing out
Bitcoin, man, Bitcoin.
these are all the old stuff that we know about, like Beijing Underground City. We know there's one in Russia that's giant that was underneath their train system in Moscow. And these are just the ones that are public. Like there's where was that one? The Treasury. And then you got the salt mine. These are all famous old ones, like you were saying, like Petra. 22,000 people could have lived in there back in the things. 20,000 people at Darren Kuyu, and that's just what they found. But imagine the things that are modern. Here's Burlington, that supposedly 4,000 government personnels are would be able to get in there and live. And this is old. This is all old continuity of government shut down. But now, imagine what they have built now. I mean, literally, I was thinking on this topic that I live near Carlsbad Caverns. And when you go there and you visit, it's really cool. You go deep underground, about a mile, wide open, you know, cave system. It's giant in there. But when you get to the end of it, you hop in this like a 1950s Cold War style elevator that takes you up to the top level, the ground level, really fast. And if they have that, imagine what's on the side of the whole backside of that mountain, all the way over through the Rio Grande Valley, up into where people talk about Dulce and stuff. There's plenty of places to build these, and I would argue that they did, and in fact have built lots of these domes. But I think they're more technologically advanced than we think. And if you can take an elevator in like 30 seconds from a mile down in the earth for just a tourist trap, imagine what they have and the transit systems that they've built, because that was a government built elevator there. I know it's old, but it's just like it's literally the same elevator. If you've ever seen that movie Spies Like Us, where they go out to the gas station and then they get dropped down into the old base underneath, it's just like that. So it's pretty trippy. I would think that if something was going to happen, like I was kind of pointing out, that they already have laid out the plans and the groundwork and the infrastructure for continuity of everything. And I would think that it wouldn't be just nation states. We know billionaires are building stuff like that. But think about what the banking system and the real secret societies, some that we don't even know about, because most of the ones you joke about or hear about, or you see memes about, that's all stuff that we've known for a long time. And they wouldn't be a real actual secret society if you knew about it. That means that those were failed secret societies, or at least the societies that they wanted you to know about and learn about. So somewhere, and I would say here in the US, England, China, France, probably Russia, on and on, they have underground cities, and they have continuity of government and continuity of corporations already built, supplied, ready for some kind of event, whether it's that, and I was wondering too, like, you imagine if something like this, what was it called? I forgot again, the manga doomsday prediction, about this giant earthquake in Tokyo. We kind of saw what a 9.0 would do to it. Imagine something even bigger near that area, or even off the west coast of the United States, because it's very possible to happen there. So there's any number of these giant things that would totally reset everything we know about living on planet Earth, but not the governments, not the banks. Just like in ancient times, they'll be there to take control right after whatever happens.
It reminds me of the Bitcoin citadels. Now, if you haven't heard about the Bitcoin citadel, there was supposedly a time traveler that came back from going into the future some 70 years from now, or it was like 2070, somewhere around there. Came back and said, "Oh, I got to find this computer. I had like 1/10 of a Bitcoin in it. I got to find it. I got to find it." This is many years ago, this time traveler story. It's like, this is 1/10 of a Bitcoin, 1/10 of a Bitcoin, not a whole Bitcoin, 1/10 would allow you to get into some sort of citadel where all your life needs were taken care of, and you lived opulently for the rest of your life for just 1/10 of a Bitcoin. Conversely, everybody outside who didn't have Bitcoin was in sort of this dystopian, end of the world movie, whatever one you want to choose. They were kind of in this, no, there was nothing functional. It was like survival of the fittest, whoever lived in sort of this world. But the way they had portrayed it in my mind, the way it was going, it was an above ground thing and like a castle setting with walls around it. But you just showed me it's not. It's an underground. It's going to be underground. Now, perhaps with this Bitcoin, you'll be like brought into the center of the hollow earth, or you'll be taken to a section of the quote unquote hollow earth to live out, advanced technologies, advanced medicines, and this sort of thing. And if you were smart enough to have the BTC and be able to hold on to it in a cold wallet, while whatever it is, but the Bitcoin Citadel, you just sparked my mind there. It's not an above ground facility. It's a below ground facility. That's the reason I was trying to make the point. You brought that article up, did you not?
Well, it was an article about how somebody changed the original Reddit post of the time travel, but nobody knows who did it. And keep in mind that they kind of have a trick here, because if you went to the internet and you Google Bitcoin Citadel, you might find a couple articles. So if you look up Bitcoin City, you're all going to get that El Salvador thing. But if you look up proposed smart cities, then it all opens up, right? Because those are all the same thing. They're all the Bitcoin citadels. And I was thinking, in some places it might be underground, but other places, maybe Saudi Arabia, it might not be. It might
It'll be
be
that
above
like
ground.
glass thing, yeah.
Right, the giant wall. So there's
You can
all
only
of
come
these.
in if you have Bitcoin. Is that the whole thing of it? You can only buy your way in with a tenth of a Bitcoin?
Yes, and it's just like some of and it's funny because that's now the fad in science fiction movies. You have what is it? Fallout Fallout Boy or something like that, and then there's the a really good one that's called The Silo. If you want to check that out, really good sci-fi. It's about a group of silos. Um, Something happened to the Earth where you're assuming it's like nuclear war or something, but they have 10,000 people per silo, and there's a whole system of government there that's exactly like the US system of government, where you have a judicial and an executive branch, and then you have a working class, and you have the upper kind of elites that have the managerial jobs, and then down at the bottom are where the slave labor miners are working that got in trouble because they violated the system. They shoved them down in there. But the show's called Silo. And when you start watching it for a while, all knowledge has been banned. All books have been taken, because originally it was a utopia where everybody got to learn and know everything. But every 20 years, they'd throw a revolution. So somebody had the idea that if they knew about the previous revolutions, they would keep doing them. So they erased everybody's memory using drugs in the water till slowly people forgot. And then smart people keep popping up despite their effort to keep people uneducated, and they would figure out that the stars move, that the earth is round, and they would come up with these ideas that would be deemed dangerous to the state, because every idea that makes you think gives you another idea, and then more and more people think about things, and they don't want you to think. They want you to be a robot. They want you to do your job and take your rations and use your credits, just like the Bitcoin. Use your credits to buy and do anything. And if you have saved up enough, you get to move into better quarters higher up in the silo. But eventually they realize that it's an analog for the planet Earth. The silo is the planet Earth. And then eventually they find out there's other worlds out there. In other words, other silos with different things happening. And it's really, really bizarre show, but it goes right into this. They have all of these shows that are about this, where people are going to be locked in vaults via corporation or their government or whatever it is, but they're going to have an electronic monetary system once that they're in there. The reality is the silo itself, the idea of the arrangement of the people.
Never sell your Bitcoin. I'm telling you right now, please, anybody out there, not tooting the horn or anything, but please never, ever, 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 never, ever sell any of your crypto. Get loans against it. And it's not financial advice. This is just what, the 0.1% of wealthy, or the top 1/10 of 1% of the wealthiest people on the planet. They do not sell their assets. They get loans against their assets. So if you have one Bitcoin, I'm going to use round numbers. You have one Bitcoin right now. You're able to take a loan out on that just because you have the collateral of up to something like $50,000 on that. But I think that's dangerous, because if it drops to 50K, then you're going to get margin called. So if you take 30,000 as a loan out on one Bitcoin, and then next year it goes to 200,000, then you'll be able to take 60,000 out, or 50,000 the next year. And then if it climbs up to 750, you'll be able to take out 200,000 loan. But you're just simply paying it off with the old money, getting a new loan to pay off the old loan. And as Bitcoin keeps going up in price, you just continually do what the wealthy elite do. They never, ever sell their assets, ever. They always get loans against them, whether it's gold, real estate, Bitcoin, art, cars, anything. That's what they do. And you know what? That interest is deductible off of your tax return.